What if the best British spy thrillers were not hidden in vaults or premium platforms, but sitting online, waiting for you to press play tonight? Imagine tales of double lives, coded messages, and cold stares across smoky rooms, all free to stream. These are not your glossy Bond spectacles, but rare, tense masterworks that once vanished into the fog of history. Let's begin the countdown. Number 15, The Spy Who Came In from the Cold, 1965. This film is not just a Cold War thriller, it is a moral collapse filmed in black and white despair. Richard Burton plays a broken British agent sent to fake defection to East Germany. The world he enters is gray, without heroes, and without mercy. The story bleeds realism. Nothing explodes, but everything burns. Based on John le Carré's novel, it was Britain's answer to American Flash. Audiences were stunned by how quiet it was, how brutal it felt. No gadgets, no martinis, just lies. Governments hated its cynicism. American studios tried to tone it down, fearing audiences would see the West as cold as the East. Burton refused to smile in press tours, insisting the film showed truth. Behind the camera, director Martin Ritt clashed with producers over tone. They wanted tension, he wanted despair. Ritt won. The film became a slow punch to the stomach. Critics called it unpatriotic. British intelligence veterans privately called it accurate. Its legacy grew through decades. Modern spy stories like Tinker Tailor's Soldier Spy owe their souls to it. It is now streaming free in restored form. Watch it and feel the chill of a world where loyalty dies quietly and truth has no flag. Number 14, The Deadly Affair, 1967. From the same shadowed world came The Deadly Affair, another le Carré adaptation, but filmed with weary elegance by Sidney Lumet. James Mason plays a British agent investigating a suspicious suicide. London feels old, tired, and morally poisoned. Each scene drips with melancholy. Audiences expecting action walked out. This was about paranoia, not punches. The color palette was drained using a special technique to make London look like it had never seen sunlight. Censors hated the bleak tone. The title itself was changed from A Small Town in Germany to avoid offending allies. Production was cursed. Lumet shot in freezing winter fog, losing entire days to weather. Yet that misery made the film immortal. The city becomes a character cold and unforgiving. Critics later realized it predicted the moral fatigue of the entire intelligence community. Today, the film has resurfaced on several legal platforms free to stream. It remains one of the most honest portrayals of post-war disillusionment ever filmed. Watch Mason's quiet eyes as he realizes everyone lies, including himself. The Deadly Affair is a forgotten jewel, polished again by time, a whisper from an age when betrayal was the national language. Number 13, The Ipcress File, 1965. Before Bond there was Harry Palmer. Before glamour, there was grit. The Ipcress File gave Britain a working-class spy played by Michael Caine in his breakout role. He was cynical, cheap, and always late. He bought groceries while decoding secrets. That was its power. Audiences loved it, but MI5 did not. The film's plot about brainwashing British agents hit too close to home. Censors demanded changes. Producers fought back and won. Even the soundtrack by John Barry felt hypnotic, like hypnosis itself. Some theaters briefly banned it in Germany, claiming it mocked NATO trust. Behind the scenes, Caine and director Sidney J. Furie feuded constantly. Yet their creative tension made magic. The odd camera angles, the claustrophobic lenses, the sense that walls were watching you all came from real arguments turned into art. Over the years, its influence grew quietly. It spawned sequels, but none as pure as the first, now restored and legally streaming. The Ipcress File stands as Britain's anti-Bond manifesto. It taught us espionage was not fun, it was fatal. And as you watch Harry Palmer light another cigarette in the dark, you can almost smell the paranoia of an empire watching itself decay. Number 12, The Quiller Memorandum, 1966. The Quiller Memorandum is not your standard spy film, it is a ghost story disguised as espionage. George Siegel plays Quiller, a British operative sent to West Berlin to infiltrate a group of post-war Nazis hiding behind polite society. There are no car chases, no explosions, just whispers in dim corridors and a feeling that everyone already knows too much. Upon release, it confused audiences expecting Bond-style excitement. What they got instead was an icy meditation on duty and deceit. The film's script, written by Harold Pinter, stripped dialogue down to riddles. Every sentence sounds like a code, every pause like a warning. Critics accused it of being too intelligent for its own good. Yet decades later, those same critics call it visionary. Its production history was just as shadowy. The studio worried it would be labeled pro-Nazi because of its sympathetic villains. British censors wanted scenes cut where government officials appeared complicit. The director Michael Anderson refused, saying truth must be uncomfortable. Shooting in West Berlin only 2 decades after the war lent the film eerie authenticity. Extras were actual locals who remembered the rubble. Even the soundtrack by John Barry feels like a funeral hymn. When it ended, audiences sat in silence. That was the point. The Quiller Memorandum is now free to stream, and its tension still crawls under the skin. It reminds viewers that evil rarely shouts, it whispers, and that sometimes the mission is simply to keep breathing in a city that wants you gone. Number 11. The Day of the Jackal, 1973. When The Day of the Jackal arrived, it redefined precision storytelling. Directed by Fred Zinnemann and adapted from Frederick Forsyth's novel, it followed a nameless assassin hired to kill French President Charles de Gaulle. Yet behind that plot was a frightening realism that made governments nervous. The Jackal's methods were so detailed that several countries temporarily banned the film, fearing it taught assassination. The movie was a hit, but also a headache. French authorities threatened legal action, claiming it portrayed national security failures. Some theaters pulled it after reports that real criminals studied its techniques. What began as entertainment became instruction. Filmed across Europe with a meticulous schedule, it used no digital tricks, no flashy stunts. Edward Fox played the assassin with unnerving calm. His charm hid deadliness. During shooting, Zinnemann clashed with producers who wanted more emotion. He refused, saying the film was about efficiency, not feeling. Every movement was measured, every sound meant something. Critics hailed it as the most intelligent thriller ever made. Yet for years, it was hard to find on television due to its banned status in several regions. Now it is available legally online, restored in full glory. Watching it today feels prophetic. In an era of surveillance and drones, it still asks a haunting question. What if the most dangerous man in the world looked utterly ordinary? Number 10. The Fourth Protocol, 1987. In the late 80s, when Cold War fear was fading, The Fourth Protocol brought it roaring back. Based on another Forsyth novel, it starred Michael Caine as British agent John Preston and Pierce Brosnan as a Soviet operative plotting to detonate a nuclear device on English soil. The film was tense, political, and terrifyingly plausible. Upon release, it was both praised and punished. The government of the United Kingdom reportedly disliked its suggestion that MI5 officials could be traitors. Some television channels refused to air it, citing national sensitivity. Yet audiences adored it. They saw in Caine's weary eyes the cost of vigilance. He was older, heavier, but still sharp as steel. Behind the scenes, the production was turbulent. Filming in Finland and Scotland faced harsh weather and political pressure. Brosnan was warned by his handlers at the time that playing a Soviet could damage his career. He ignored them. His performance became one of the most chilling portrayals of calm menace in spy cinema. The Fourth Protocol was released to strong box office numbers, but quietly buried in the following years, overshadowed by flashier action flicks. Now available free on several streaming platforms, it stands as one of the last true Cold War thrillers that understood paranoia better than spectacle. It ends not with victory, but with the uneasy silence of two nations staring into mutual destruction. It is a film that dares to whisper that peace itself might be another secret operation. Number 9. The Macintosh Man, 1973. The Macintosh Man is one of those thrillers that never shouted, but haunted. Directed by John Huston and starring Paul Newman, it is the story of deceit within deceit, a film about a spy who must pretend to be a criminal to catch one. The mission spirals through British prisons, Irish coastlines and corridors where trust is the rarest currency. Released during a decade of political weariness, it confused audiences looking for glamour. This was no Bond adventure. Newman's character, Joseph Reardon, lived in dirt and paranoia. The film opens with a jewel robbery, but beneath that heist beats the heart of espionage. When Reardon is imprisoned and recruited by the mysterious Macintosh, the story becomes a study of moral corrosion. Critics called it cold. That was exactly what Huston wanted. He shot the film with stark realism, using natural light to emphasize hopelessness. During production, Irish locals protested the use of their countryside for a story they felt portrayed the region as lawless. Huston dismissed the uproar, saying the landscape itself was the perfect metaphor for exile and confusion. Behind the camera, Newman was exhausted by studio interference. The script kept changing due to censorship concerns about British corruption. Yet those cracks in narrative gave the film authenticity. Life in espionage was never smooth. The Macintosh Man eventually vanished from theaters, overshadowed by flashier thrillers. But its reputation grew among filmmakers. It is now streaming freely, a cold masterpiece rediscovered. Watch it and you will feel the weight of duty crushing humanity, the loneliness of a man pretending too long to remember who he was. Number 8. The Odessa File, 1974. The Odessa File burns with moral urgency. Directed by Ronald Neame and based on Frederick Forsyth's bestseller, it stars John Voight as a journalist uncovering a secret network of ex-Nazis hiding in post-war Germany. What he finds is not only conspiracy, but complicity stretching across governments and borders. When it premiered, it hit nerves everywhere. Some European broadcasters refused to promote it, claiming it stirred wounds better left closed. Survivors praised it as courage. Governments called it provocation. It was banned temporarily in several Eastern Bloc countries, accused of promoting Western propaganda. Behind the scenes, production faced sabotage. Anonymous letters threatened cast members. Filming in Hamburg required police protection. Yet Voight pressed on, obsessed with the role. He studied Holocaust testimonies and refused body doubles for dangerous scenes. Director Neame called him possessed by truth. The Odessa File became both hit and controversy. Critics were divided. Some admired its moral clarity, others said it exploited trauma. But time changed judgment. Now seen as one of the most powerful depictions of post-war guilt, it exposes how history hides in plain sight. Today, it streams free, restored, and resonant. Watching it feels like unearthing a buried confession. It reminds us that evil never truly dies, it merely waits for silence. When Voight's character stares at his notes trembling, you see more than acting. You see the cost of knowing too much. Number 7. Defense of the Realm, 1985. By the mid-'80s, Britain was drowning in paranoia about secrets leaks and shadow governments. Defense of the Realm captured that fear perfectly. Gabriel Byrne plays a journalist who uncovers a political scandal only to realize the government itself is hunting him. What begins as investigation becomes survival. Released in the final years of the Cold War, it was dismissed by politicians as paranoia porn. Yet everything about it felt real. The film's tone was claustrophobic, filmed in tight London alleys under gray skies. No heroes, just frightened men with microphones instead of guns. Production faced government pushback. Reporters whispered that certain scenes mirrored real intelligence scandals. The studio received anonymous warnings to soften dialogue suggesting MI5 oversight. Director David Drury refused. He wanted audiences to feel cornered. Byrne delivered his lines with quiet dread. His co-star Denholm Elliott added weary humor to the despair. Critics later compared it to All the President's Men, but darker. There was no victory here. The deeper the journalist searched, the more truth dissolved. Even the soundtrack pulsed like a racing heart, echoing surveillance anxiety. Its legacy is sharper now than ever. In an era of leaks and whistleblowers, Defense of the Realm feels prophetic. It streams freely today on several British archives. Watching it is like reliving a nightmare of press suppression, where truth was both weapon and curse. The film closes on silence, the kind that follows when freedom becomes classified. Number 6. The Whistleblower, 1986. The Whistleblower is not a spy film about gadgets or car chases. It is about conscience. Michael Caine plays a father whose son, an intelligence analyst, dies mysteriously after questioning British spy operations. What begins as grief turns into a journey through lies that eat nations from the inside. The film was released during a fragile political moment when whistleblowers were being demonized. Many saw it as subversive. Newspapers accused it of anti-government bias. Certain theaters refused to screen it, claiming it undermined morale during the last tense years of the Cold War. That controversy became its fuel. Caine delivered one of his most human performances. Gone was the charm of his earlier spy roles, replaced by quiet rage and broken dignity. Behind the camera, director Simon Langton clashed with financiers who wanted a more traditional thriller. He refused. He wanted realism, not entertainment. The production shot on gray winter days in real government buildings, giving every frame a documentary feel. Even the dialogue was drawn from leaked parliamentary transcripts. Critics were divided. Some praised its honesty, others called it depressing, but audiences who found it saw themselves reflected in the film's exhausted morality. The idea that truth could kill was no longer fiction. Today, The Whistleblower has resurfaced legally online. Its relevance feels sharper than ever. It warns that secrets are not strength and that loyalty to truth may be the most dangerous duty of all. Watching Caine's eyes fill with realization is to witness a man waking up to the betrayal of everything he believed in. Number 5. The Spy in Black, 1939. Before Bond, before the Cold War even began, there was The Spy in Black. Directed by Michael Powell, it was released on the eve of World War II. Starring Conrad Veidt and Valerie Hobson, it told the story of a German U-boat captain sent to Scotland for espionage, who unexpectedly falls into a web of deceit and double identities. At the time, it was revolutionary, a British film that dared to humanize a German officer months before war broke out. That decision nearly killed its release. Censors panicked, fearing it might appear sympathetic to the enemy. Politicians urged the studio to shelve it, but Powell refused, saying understanding the enemy was not treason, it was realism. Production was plagued by tension. Crew members argued about patriotism while filming scenes depicting German victory. Veidt himself, a real-life refugee from Nazi Germany, brought haunting authenticity to his role. He knew the system he portrayed. Some extras were actual soldiers soon to be called into combat. When it premiered, audiences sat in stunned silence. It was too close to reality, too prophetic. Once war began, the film disappeared from cinemas, buried by propaganda. Only decades later did critics call it a masterpiece. Now freely available online, The Spy in Black feels almost supernatural. Watching it is like glimpsing the future through the past. It reminds us that war begins not with weapons, but with fear and misunderstanding. Powell's camera saw it before the world exploded. Number 4. Smiley's People, 1982. Smiley's People was not a film for thrill seekers. It was a quiet funeral for the idea of heroism. Based on John le Carré's final George Smiley novel, it starred Alec Guinness in one of television's greatest performances, later edited into film form. Smiley returns from retirement to solve the murder of a Soviet defector, only to discover it ties back to his lifelong nemesis, Carla. The tone was elegiac. There was no action, no romance, just old men tidying up the ruins of ideology. Critics initially called it too slow, but time proved them wrong. This was intelligence work, as it truly was patient, painful, and personal. Production was intense. Guinness insisted on rehearsing alone to maintain Smiley's isolation. Le Carré visited set, often clashing with producers about accuracy. He wanted the bureaucracy, the paperwork, the human decay, all shown truthfully. The BBC faced pressure from political groups, fearing the series made British intelligence appear corrupt. They ignored it and aired it uncut. Audiences who stayed with it found something transcendent. When Smiley finally confronts Carla across a frozen bridge, it feels less like victory and more like tragedy. Two men realizing they became what they fought against. Now, the restored film version is streaming legally, and it remains one of Britain's crowning achievements in espionage storytelling. Smiley's People is not entertainment, it is archaeology. It digs into loyalty, love, and loss, until only silence remains. When Guinness walks away at the end, you feel the entire Cold War exhale. Number 3. The Constant Gardener, 2005. Though newer than most on this list, The Constant Gardener deserves its place because it carries the spirit of the old British spy tradition into the modern age. Directed by Fernando Meirelles and based on the novel by John le Carré, it stars Ralph Fiennes as a mild-mannered diplomat who investigates the death of his activist wife and uncovers a pharmaceutical conspiracy stretching across continents. This was not the fantasy of espionage, it was the anatomy of exploitation. When the film released, it enraged corporations and politicians alike. Real pharmaceutical executives condemned it for suggesting Western companies tested drugs on African citizens. Several African governments initially blocked its release, calling it incendiary propaganda. Yet audiences saw truth inside the fiction. It was too plausible to dismiss. The production faced chaos from the start. Filming in Kenya required secret cooperation from local officials who feared political backlash. Crew members witnessed real poverty and illness, influencing their work deeply. Ralph Fiennes refused trailers or body doubles, preferring to walk through real neighborhoods and live among the locals to absorb the world his character was blind to. Critics hailed it as a masterpiece of conscience. The soundtrack blended sorrow with tension, and the cinematography turned sunlight into judgment. Yet behind all beauty, the film whispered betrayal. Today, it streams legally across multiple free platforms and remains a lesson in moral courage. The Constant Gardener reminds us that spies are not always soldiers in suits. Sometimes they are husbands who dare to ask why. Watching its quiet ending feels like standing before a grave filled with both truth and guilt. Number 2. The Man Who Never Was, 1956. Based on the real Operation Mincemeat, this film tells a true wartime deception that changed history. The British planted false documents on a corpse dressed as an officer to mislead the Nazis about Allied invasion plans. It was one of the most audacious acts of intelligence ever attempted, and it worked. When the film premiered, audiences were stunned. They had never seen espionage portrayed with such realism, yet some within the intelligence community wanted it suppressed, claiming it revealed too much about secret methods still in use. Several military advisors tried to have it banned. The producers refused. They said truth had already been paid for in blood. Production itself was wrapped in secrecy. The filmmakers used declassified records only partially available. Some crew members were veterans who had participated in the real operation but swore oaths never to speak of it publicly. Even lead actor Clifton Webb had to sign agreements preventing interviews about the true details. Critics praised it as both thrilling and deeply human. It portrayed war not as glory, but as grim necessity. The real body used in the operation remains buried in Spain, a symbol of sacrifice through deception. Now, The Man Who Never Was streams free in remastered form. It stands as both memorial and warning. It tells us that truth can be weaponized and that victory sometimes requires a lie carved into history itself. When the final salute fades, the silence that follows feels heavier than any explosion. Number 1. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, 1979. At the top of our list stands the crown jewel of British espionage storytelling. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy is not merely a television miniseries, later edited into film format. It is the purest distillation of le Carré's worldview. Alec Guinness, as George Smiley, delivers a performance of such quiet devastation that time itself seems to hold its breath. The plot is labyrinthine. Within the corridors of British intelligence, a traitor hides at the highest level. Smiley must return from forced retirement to uncover which of his old friends is the mole. No explosions, no glamour, only intellect, paranoia, and heartbreak. Every whisper carries the weight of empires. Upon release, it gripped the nation. Viewers held their breath each week, debating who the traitor was. Politicians reportedly complained that it mirrored real divisions within MI6. The BBC was warned about possible leaks from actual cases. Yet Le Carré himself smiled, saying fiction merely reflects what already exists. Production was grueling. Guinness stayed in character for months, avoiding crew members between takes to preserve Smiley's isolation. Director John Irvin shot scenes in real abandoned offices instead of sets, capturing the loneliness of bureaucracy. The gray palette became iconic. The soundtrack mourned rather than thrilled. Its legacy is immeasurable. Modern thrillers, from The Americans to Slow Horses, owe everything to it. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy redefined espionage as tragedy, not adventure. It is now streaming free for those willing to step into its cold genius. Watching it today feels like peering into the soul of secrecy itself. It is not about who wins, but who survives, knowing the truth. 15 British spy thrillers. 15 windows into paranoia power and the price of truth. These films remind us that espionage is not about glory, it is about ghosts. Which one will you dare to watch tonight? Tell us in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe for more. Stories from the shadows where silence always has a motive.